Welcome to the Internet History Podcast. I'm your host, Brian McCullough. So, over the years, as I've been working on this project, now and again I've run across mentions of the first ever SMS message or text message that was sent on December 3rd, 1992. It was sent by Neil Papworth, and it said simply, "Merry Christmas." It was sent to one of his colleagues at Vodafone at the time, Richard Jarvis. And in all of the articles about this first text message, the sender of that message, Neil Papworth, only got about a sentence or two at best to tell the whole story and give the background on how it came about. So I thought it would be worthwhile to contact Neil and give him the time to tell that whole story for the historical record. And that's what we have today. Neil Papworth with the story of the first ever text message. Neil Papworth, thanks for coming on the Internet History Podcast.
My pleasure. How are you today?
I'm doing well. I always like to start with educational background, and you went to the University of West London studying computer science, but I see from your CV that you right away get into gadgetry and things. Like, was it software? What were you studying specifically?
Well, I studied basically, it was like an all-encompassing, they called it computer studies back then. When I was actually 16, I left school and I went to a college of further education, and they started offering something which in the UK was called an ordinary national diploma, and it was in computer studies, and that was when I was 16, so that was about 1986, and this is one of the first places to kind of offer a technical qualification like that in computer studies, because in the mid-80s computing was in its early age, especially for the younger masses.
Right.
I actually did 2 years before that. I did this ordinary national diploma, and that allowed me to get into the higher national diploma course, which is what I did. And again, they kind of just labeled it computer studies, because back then there weren't so many specialties as there are today. Today you can go and do AI, robotics, like GUI design, Java. There's so many branches that have come off of that. Back in those days, you were just kind of working with computers.
Right.
You're a programmer or something. They hadn't specialized all those things. So when I actually started, when I was 18, I'd actually already been working for 2 years, kind of at that stage. I've been working some days and some summers and that kind of stuff at this company called Ferranti, which back in those days was like a defense contractor. They did all kinds of other stuff, but I was working on kind of Ministry of Defense projects. And by the time I got to 18, I actually started working full time for Ferranti, and that was basically 4 days a week. So you worked 4 days a week, and then one long day a week. You went from like 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. I went and did this higher national diploma, and I did that for 3 years. They used to call it day release. So it actually got you the same qualification as if you spent 3 years studying full time. It was actually called a college back then before it became a university. It actually gave you the same qualification, but then you had 3 years of work experience as well. So I preferred to pursue that path, because I could see that by the time you get to 21, you come out of university, you come out of college, one of the most desired things that the companies are looking for is work experience, not just, you came out of college and then there's a glut of people, they come out during the summer. Here's someone who's got the same qualification, but also has spent 3 years actually doing stuff, so you're putting it to good use in the real world. So that's what I kind of did.
And I was asking for that distinction because, like, at Ferranti, you're doing things like working with satellite antennas, software for automated helicopter landing aids. Like, so there's a fair degree of actual electrical engineering mixed in all this as well.
Yeah, so I wasn't involved too much in the electrical side of that.
Okay.
But this was kind of embedded systems, whereas you had like a rack that went into a vehicle or went somewhere, and it was kind of slot-based computers. And when I was writing software for those, we'd end up having to like burn the software onto EEPROM chips and put it onto the actual boards themselves. And so it was embedded, and it was working with hardware. So, for example, the steerable satellite antenna that was mounted on a vehicle, and then the vehicle would have gyroscopes and magnetometers, which are basically electronic compasses. It kind of almost has like everything's in your cell phone today, and so it can tell when the vehicle, which way it's facing, whether it's bumping, whether it's kind of leaning to the left or the right. And if you imagine now you were trying to use a satellite dish to watch satellite TV, and you had it in a vehicle. If you got a point at that one place in the sky, if you turn left, on the vehicle, you'd have to move the antenna to the right to keep it pointing at the same place in the sky. Mm-hmm. So that's pretty much what the steerable satellite antenna did. And then when I was working on the helicopter landing aids, that was ultimately going to be able to put something on the back of a ship. So when a helicopter's trying to land on a ship, a helicopter landing on the ground isn't really going anywhere. It's kind of generally just staying there. But when you're trying to land on a ship, the ship is first often moving forward, and then it's going up and down in the waves, and you don't want to be coming down on a helicopter as the back of the boat is coming up, because it's hit the front of the boat's gone in a big wave. So you're trying to like give the helicopter an idea of where it is in relation to the landing pad. So the helicopter pilot might be able to see the boat moving, but he's not necessarily sure how high above the deck he is, or whether he's to the left or the right or backwards and forwards. So that was an early phase of that project, and that was really fun as well. That was using image processing and triangulation, like two cameras looking at a single point and working out how far the helicopter is away. So that was some of my early life in my computing career.
Well, tell me about Semigroup Telecoms, which I guess is where you go to work after graduation. What are they doing, and how do you start to get involved with early cellular technology?
Well, when I moved to Semigroup, that was pretty much almost at the exact same time that I was graduating with my higher national diploma. So I moved to Semigroup, and Semigroup back then they were one of these big software companies in the UK and France, where they had something like 30,000 employees, and they had their fingers in every pie. They did defense stuff, they did transport, they did medical, government software, and telecoms was just another one of those branches. So I move into that telecoms area, and I start working on some of the stuff for mobile phones.
And this is, like I said, very early days. Like, is this around the time when GSM is first starting to be deployed across Europe?
Exactly, yeah. So this was 1991, and certainly in the UK, there were plenty of companies that had cell phone networks running, but they were the old analog technologies. Everyone remembers the sounds of clanging bits of metal when you're on an old analog cell phone call, when the which isn't too good. And so, yeah, this was working on some of the stuff that's kind of in the backbone of the GSM network as it kind of started to roll out. So when I started working on the project, I started working on a project which was something called an AUC, which is an authentication center that deals with encryption of the data and the calls. It would store information about your SIM card, so it would know, you are you, and then it would have secret keys on it as well that only the SIM card and the network knows. So that's how they can encrypt your data. Mm-hmm. And the other one was something called an EIR, an Equipment Identity Register, And what that is basically is just a big database lookup of handsets. Now, you might be aware that you can, every GSM phone has a unique identifier called an IMEI, International Mobile Equipment Identity. And I think you can get this if you want to look at it. You type on your *#06# and it will come up on the screen what the IMEI of the phone is, and it's normally printed somewhere either inside or on the SIM tray as well, and normally on the box that you buy it in. And what this equipment identity register allowed you to do was, if your handset was stolen, you could call up your network operator and say, "Hey, my handset's been stolen." Either you or they would know the IMEI, and then you'd load it into this database. So you'd often just use this database as a list of handsets that are not allowed. So that would mean if somebody stole your phone and then you reported it and then they tried to use it, it would be blocked and they wouldn't be able to use it on the network. And of course, this is something that helps prevent theft. So it's interesting that I was working on that back in 1991, and there was still, I still hear nowadays that companies, cell phone companies, are developing technologies to crack down on cell phone crime, and they'll be able to blacklist phones. This new technology they've come up with or deploying. And it's funny. It's been around since 1991. It's just not many people have been using it really, because why would the phone network really not want anyone to use a phone on their network? If they block this handset, then maybe you'll go to another one that doesn't block it, and then they lose a customer. But that's pretty much that's the crux of what it does anyway. So those are the first two projects I worked on, mm-hmm. and then after that I started to move on to the SMS stuff.
Right. SMS. Well, let's underline something. So this is the exact switch over from analog to digital, and so as digital networks are being set up, part of this means that you can send data. And so SMS is what, a specification that's a part of GSM as it rolls out. Do you know anything about the story of how SMS as a specification came to be?
Well, not so much about how it came to be.
Right.
So SMS was always was part of the GSM standards. So mm-hmm. Imagine with all this telecom stuff, there's these published standards. Nowadays, it's handled by an organization called 3GPP. But yeah, they publish the standards for how all of these things like these AUCs, EIRs, and SMSCs work, so that the communications between them is done in a standard way. So you can take an AUC from one customer and an EIR from another customer and an SMS from another customer, and they all talk to each other because they're all talking the same language in the middle. So text messaging was, I don't know if it was in the original draft, but by the time I got into it, it was, standards were there, and obviously we started to develop it.
Well, yeah. So let's hear that story. So you have the distinction of being the first person to send an SMS text message. How did you come to be that person? And tell me what you're working on as you're deploying SMS.
Right. So in 1992, I'd been in Semigroup about a year. I'd been working on the AUC and EIR, and then I was basically just coding back then. So in 92, I was offered the opportunity to become a designer and design one of the components that the SMS was going to use. So I helped. So I designed that. I did some of the implementation as well, and then there was a lot of people on this project. There was up to 29 people, I think it was, working on this SMS project. And once everyone had finished their individual components, and there was an existing platform that we used that we'd taken from the AUC and the EIR, so we were reusing stuff there. And eventually we come to test all this stuff together. We called it system testing. So we plug everything together, and then you run simulating sending a message, and then you simulating what the network is responding with, and then testing all the software. And so I was really keen to get involved in the testing of that, because it was, it would expand my knowledge of all of the other components, and it was just good fun doing that. I mean, those were some glory days. We used to work all kinds of hours. That was back in the days of paid overtime. And when you're 22 years old and someone's saying, you can come in and work a weekend and work another 3 or 4 hours each night during the week and get paid for it and get free pizza because you're working an extra 4 hours or something like that. Sometimes there was like a dozen of us there a weekend. I remember we spent many a night and a weekend in there, and we really tested the heck out of that stuff. And eventually, the first customer for this was, they were paying for the development for it, was Vodafone in the UK. Mm-hmm. And somebody said, they kind of asked for volunteers to go down to Vodafone to install the software down there, plug it into their network. And Vodafone had very strict integration and compliance procedures. So in the telecoms world back then, there was a telecommunications kind of protocol, the way things connect up and talk to each other, called we're all aware of things like Ethernet today and TCP/IP. Mm-hmm. But back in the telecoms world, back then there was something called SS7, Signaling System Number 7, and it was kind of like a slow, clunky kind of telecoms communication standard at the hardware and the software level. And so we had like these new computers, plugging them into their network, and Vodafone hadn't done this before with this particular type of software and hardware. So they needed to first of all test that this signaling system between our computers and their network wasn't going to bring down the rest of their network. So they did some testing of this SS7 interface, and then eventually I installed the SMS software on the machines. There was 2 machines back then, kind of a larger one and a smaller one. And so I had volunteered to go down there to help set up the software and test it with Vodafone. And one of the bonuses for me as well was that I used to go to the office in Reading, and then I used to have to drive down to Newbury in Berkshire, which I think was about 20 or 30 miles or something like that. And I used to be able to use my boss's company car, which back in the 90s was quite a fancy sports car. So I used to come to the office and get to hammer his Cavalier SRI down the motorway at probably speeds I shouldn't talk about. But it was, again, you're 22 years old, you had free pizza, and you get to drive your boss's car. So that was an added bonus. And so eventually, I'd been down there. We'd been testing it for quite a few months, and it wasn't only me down there. I was there quite often. There were quite a few other people that were down there, or I was down there testing with other people, 3 or 4 people there sometimes. And so I guess that takes us up to the point where we finished testing it, and it seems to work.
So right, and so the obvious next step is to actually use it in a real world situation. So how is it that you get to be the one to send the first message?
Well, the way I remember it is that I was just down there one day, and someone kind of taps me on the shoulder and says, "We want you to send a message to this person. We're going to do it later. He's going to be at the Vodafone Christmas party." And so it's like, yeah, okay. I didn't think anything more of it than that. So then I went and sat in the machine room, because back then we were just testing in these big, kind of like, I guess now you'd liken them more to server rooms, kind of like lots of noise, lots of air conditioning, cold, very dry air, because there's all the switching equipment in there, and that often gets quite hot. So we're sitting in there, and I've got a bunch of guys around me in suits on their mobile phones, and someone gives me the bit of paper with the mobile number, and I think someone says "Send Merry Christmas." I'm not 100% sure whose idea that was. And they kind of like gave me the nod to send this message. So back with that original version of the SMS system we had, and the handsets that were available, the handsets didn't yet support sending a message from the handset. So I had to sit at the computer, and we had like an interface on that where you could type in the mobile number and the message, and then send it from there. So someone kind of like gave me the thumbs up to send the message at one point, and then kind of like they're all on their phones, and there's probably a bit of quiet for a while, while it's going through, and then someone, people giving me the thumbs up, and it's like all good, and then so I'm thinking, okay, that's good, it worked, and then I probably went and got some lunch or something like that. And I didn't think that much of it, really. I didn't think much about it. For me, what was important that, we had been contracted to develop this system for Vodafone. We'd made it work, and then we'd demonstrated that it worked that day.
Did you get confirmation? Like, did the guy come back from the party and say, "Hey, I got the message"?
No, he didn't. But these other people in the room told me that he got it, because they're talking to people in the room, the other end.
Uh-huh.
This day, I still don't know where they are. All I heard is that they're in a hotel on the other side of Newbury having some Vodafone Christmas party. I should find out one day when it was. But yeah, for me, all it was like, that's great, it worked. We've done our job. And I was kind of happy in my day then. That's all I really got out of it at the time.
And the message was Merry Christmas?
It was Merry Christmas,
yeah.
Yep.
Well, I can if you put yourself back in that time, I can see, like, well, that's not ever going to be a big deal. I almost feel like, reading some of the articles, like, there was skepticism, like, why would you need a messaging system if you've got a phone? If you need to talk to someone, just ring them up, right?
Right. Well, that was back in the days where people had pagers and mobile phones.
Mm-hmm.
And so the thinking is that you can get rid of the pager, you can just have one device clipped to your belt. So that was it was ultimately to replace a pager, I think, at the beginning.
And then it grew on a life of its own. So actually, having you get every decade or so, you get contacted by people like me saying, it's the 10-year anniversary, 20-year anniversary. Like, just on a personal level, are you always just, surprised that messaging became something that's probably more important than calling now, even?
Well, yeah, for sure. I mean, I back then, I didn't get my first cell phone until maybe 3 or 4 years after that. I didn't, even though, back then in the, what was that? That was about 90, well, it was 91 I sent the first, 92 sent the first message. So maybe like 94, 95 I got my first phone, and not many of my other friends had one, I guess. And, maybe you'd message them, because by then the phones could send messages from the phones directly. But, you still only, I guess I thought it was a good use. It's just things like, I'm going to be late to the pub, or, I'm on my way, or something like that. That's pretty much what I started using it for, and to be honest, it's pretty much what I use it for today. Really, I'm not a big text consumer. Mm-hmm. I'm fairly dull when it comes to that.
Do you have kids?
Yeah, I've got 3 kids.
So are they heavy texters?
No, they're not. They don't have phones yet. They're only
Gotcha.
6, 9, and 10 at the moment. So they every Christmas or birthday they put a phone on their list, and then you say, what do you want to do with it? And it's like, don't know, listen to music. I want to text my friends or something like that. But we've hooked them up with chats online. So they'll use Google Chats or Facebook Chat to chat to a couple of their friends. Mm-hmm. Supervised. But it's not many of their friends have phones either. Certainly, my oldest is 10, and
right.
Sometimes they say my friend's got a phone, but all it means is that the parents given them their old phone and they play games on it or something. It's not a phone.
Well, and we have to wonder, by the time they are old enough to have their own phones, would they even be using SMS? I mean, that's sort of going the way of WhatsApp and Facebook Messenger and all that stuff.
Yeah, I wonder as well, because I grew up with it, and a lot of people grew up with it, and I still use it today. I mean, my wife has a cell phone, but she doesn't have a data plan. So when she's on the bus and I'm trying to say, what time do I pick you up? I text her, because she's got no data. It's the only way I can get hold of her. And I know other people without data plans as well. There's so many hotspots around these days that a lot of people can get away with it. And as long as people know that hey, he or she hasn't got a data plan, I'll text them in this situation because I don't know where they are. Then it still works, because you think about most of the other messaging, without a data plan it doesn't work. WhatsApp, Skype, Facebook Messenger, Google Chats, it all it all relies on SMS. It all relies on data, and if you don't have that, SMS is pretty much the only thing that does work.
Well, Neil Papworth, hopefully when they're old enough that they can send at least one or two, so you can say, your old dad did that, was the first one to do that. But thank you so much for remembering that story for us and preserving the story of that first message for posterity.
Oh, well, you're welcome. I hope texting keeps going for a long time. I hope hope to keep the legacy going. Like you say, maybe even just to make sure my kids use it at least once.
If this is the first time you're listening to this podcast, please subscribe to us on your podcast app of choice. There's plenty more great internet history where that came from. And if you're a longtime listener, then you know what to do to help us out. Rate and review us on iTunes. Because iTunes gives credit to reviews and ratings, and the more great reviews we get, the more people will discover us. As always, there's more info on our website, www.internethistorypodcast.com. The show's Twitter handle is @NetHistoryPod, and my personal Twitter is @BrianMCC. Thanks for listening.